and how we should invest rather than listening to Jesus. In the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7, Jesus addresses the things of this world. I want to read for you Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So then if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light that is in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Just a couple things that I want to share with you this morning. The first is this: Jesus encourages us to invest wisely. To invest wisely. And he is indeed talking about material things. And the first thing about investing wisely is to take into mind this fact: earthly treasure will not last. Earthly treasures don't last. When I was a little kid, on my mother's side, Mom was one of 6, and there was a whole boatload of us cousins. And we loved to descend on Grandma and Grandpa's house. We'd climb the trees in the backyard, and we'd shoot baskets down at the park, and we'd fight with one another once in a while. But I used to like to go in my grandma's closet. You know why? There was an aroma. Mothballs. Is there such a thing anymore as mothballs? Is there? You know, we got to get some of those. We got to turn that into a cologne. Ladies, ode to mothball? No? I loved it. I would go and I'd get in my grandma's closet. Yeah, where's Bill? Oh, he's in grandma's closet getting high on the aroma of mothballs. Man, mothballs. Why did you use mothballs? To keep the moths from eating holes in your sweaters. They like cotton. They like wool. Natural fibers. They weren't big on polyester. Which is good, because it was the 70s and most of my shirts were those well, forget it. Some of you wore those too. Rich. Moths eat. They destroy. You know, we go through our wardrobes so quickly. Shoes wear out. Pants get holes in the knees. We used to patch them. Nowadays, people pay a premium for pants with holes in them. Oh, no. Sweaters get, and in my case, I don't know if you have this problem, they shrink. They don't fit like once they did. I don't get it. You know, or maybe it's just I get larger. I don't know. He goes on, he says, and rust destroys. It's interesting. We think in terms of rust. And, you know, it wasn't too long ago. I was driving down I-74. I'd been over at Bloomington to a preacher's meeting. And I was coming back, and I saw this car, and I thought, what in the world is that? I need Aaron Jones to tell me what that car is. But all of a sudden, I picked up, it was a Maserati. I had seen a Maserati once before on a showroom floor in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was surrounded by rope. You couldn't touch it. And I thought, my little car, I couldn't catch that car if I had to. It was pretty. It was sleek. And I have no idea how much that guy paid for it. And then I got to thinking, there will come a day when, just like with my little Kia, it's going to be sitting in an automobile junkyard. Its life will have come to an end. Rust will take the body. It'll be junk. As pretty as it is today. But interesting, they didn't have Maseratis in Jesus' day. They had Chevys. They were called donkeys. The word that Jesus uses here in Matthew is literally eating away. And that's where we get the idea of rust. It eats away. But for them, it was more this idea. Think of mice and rats and other vermin eating your stored grain. The very food that you have stored, put away to feed your family, the reality is that sometimes you get a mouse or a rat or some rodent of some kind and it eats away into stored grain. And the people of Jesus' day fully understood that. They knew what he's talking about. It doesn't last. And then he goes on, he says, and thieves break in and steal. That's nothing new, and it hasn't changed, has it? Have you ever had one of the salesmen for ADT or another security service come by your house, knock on your door and say, for X amount of money, we'll put this sign in your yard. It'll scare off thieves. We put locks on our doors. We have the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, to make sure that our bank accounts don't evaporate if there's another stock market crash or something like that. Go to your bank, insured up to $100,000. I don't have to worry about that. I don't have $100,000. But Jesus points out, earthly treasure will not last. Moths, rust, thieves. But notice what he says. Heavenly treasure does. Heavenly treasure is eternal. Heavenly treasure is safe and secure. Hear what the Apostle Peter wrote. In 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his great mercy has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to obtain an inheritance which is imperishable and undefiled and will not fade away, reserved in heaven for you. Our inheritance, which is not monetary, it's of far greater value than that, is reserved for us in heaven, and it is imperishable. It doesn't wear out. It doesn't grow old. It doesn't go bad. It's undefiled. It's not stained. It doesn't get ruined in any way. And it doesn't fade away. It doesn't diminish with time. Heavenly treasures, eternal. And so Jesus then goes on and he talks to us, secondly, about this. If you want to invest wisely, here's how to make a deposit. Now, I get paid weekly. I get paid on Thursday. Thank you, folks, very much. Appreciate it. And on the way home, I take my check and my deposit slip and I go through the drive-through part of the Morton Community Bank down here in the Levy District, and I give them my 2 little slips of paper, and they gave me one back that tells me what my deposit was. And then Gretchen goes and buys groceries, and I pay the mortgage, and I wait for next Thursday. But this is the point that Jesus is making in verses 22 and 23. Have you ever read through this section of the Sermon on the Mount, and you hear Jesus talking about don't store up for yourself treasures? Then you get down to verse 24 and you hear him talking about you can't serve 2 masters. But sandwiched in between, you get this stuff about eyes and light and darkness. And you go, what? Maybe you understand that paragraph quite well. But if you don't, let me walk you through it a little bit here. First of all, this idea of a good eye or a clear eye or a healthy eye, something that I'm trying to understand right now with this eye surgery. Letting in light. Okay, it's not clouded with cataract. Letting in light. In the Hebrew idiom of that word, it means generosity. What Jesus is saying, if you're a generous person, your life will be lit up. If you're a generous person, light will flood your being. as you share with others. But the bad eye, the clouded eye, the unhealthy eye in that Hebrew idiom referred to being stingy. Being stingy. Now, as I grew older and understood things better, I realized that my dad was really a very generous man. But when I was a boy, man, I thought that guy squeezed a penny so tight it made Abe Lincoln cry. I'd have said, Dad, man, you're a stingy dude. But he was generous in his way. Or maybe we think of A Christmas Carol and Scrooge. A man whose heart was what? Dark. Because his eye was bad. He was a stingy man. His God was his wealth, sitting in his money house, counting every coin and making the lives of everyone around him doubly miserable. Or if we want to be a little more lighthearted, we go back to our cartoon analogies and we have Scrooge McDuck, who always went swimming where? In his vault, swimming amongst his gold coins. The eye is dark. And so that's what this little paragraph, verses 20, 22 and 23 is about. Jesus says if you want to invest wisely, here's how you make deposits. Be generous. Don't be stingy. What is selfishly hoarded ultimately is lost. What is generously given away brings treasure in heaven. Which makes me then want to back up just a little bit to verse 21. I'm sure you've heard this before. Preachers dwell on this a lot, and I'm no exception. But in verse 21, Jesus says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Don't miss the order of his words. It's common for us to think that our money follows to where our heart loves, our interests. I love my spouse, and so I lavish her with mixers and blenders and vacuums. Oh, no, wait a minute. Flowers and chocolates and whatever. We tend to think that way. But Jesus says, no, the heart follows the treasure. And don't argue with Jesus, okay? You know, you don't like that? Tough. Take it up with him, okay? The heart follows the treasure. And here's what he's saying. If you want to follow me, understand this. If your treasure is laid up here on earth, where things are temporary and where moths destroy and rust and thieves get to it, understand this. This is where your heart will be. And when it comes time to leave, you won't want to leave. Your attachments will be so deeply embedded in this world that you have no thought of the next. But if your treasures are laid up in heaven, I can't wait to get home. My mind is set on things above, not on things below. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Your heart follows your treasure. So where are you investing? Just answer that internally. Don't tell me out loud. This is an important point. While it may seem backward, it's still true, and explains to us Matthew chapter 19. Let me get there. Chapter 19 of Matthew, verses 23 and 24. Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly I say to you, it's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again I say to you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." Why? Because he's rich? No, because his heart follows his treasure, which is bound up in the things of this earth. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is at best secondary to him, while the things of earth are primary. Why is it so difficult? Because the heart is tied to the treasure, and the treasure is stored up on earth. So Jesus goes one step further. He said, invest wisely. If you want to invest wisely, here's how to make those investments. And then he says, let's just get to the real heart of the matter. It really has to do with whom you will serve. Who will you serve? Who will be your master? This first phrase in verse 24, no one can serve two masters, literally in the Greek says no one can be a slave to two owners. The word is not just serve or servant, it's slave. You are possessed by, you belong to, and no one can be a slave to two owners. Many people, as we say, are possessed by their possessions and or their desire for even more. Gary Paxton wrote a lot of weird songs. And one of the songs he sang was, there goes a man being driven by that car. You see how he put it? The car was in charge. He also said, there goes a man being smoked by a cigar. Yeah, he wrote a lot of weird stuff. Look him up, Gary Paxton. But that's the idea that so many people are possessed by their possessions. And I have to admit, it's a hard lesson for me to learn. There are things that I own that would be very, very hard for me to give up. I understand my own materialism, my own greediness, but I don't want to be possessed by my possessions. Dr. J.K. Jones, who taught at Ozark, taught at Lincoln, ministered over Normal at the Eastview Church, and is now retired. In one of the classes that I took underneath of him in my spiritual formation studies, he told us that one of the good practices for a Christian, it's not biblical, I mean, it's not you have to. He said, but a good practice is every year give something away, not from the cleaning out of your closet, going to Goodwill or a yard sale, but something that you really like. Give away your TV. Give away your favorite sweater. Give away something that's not just clearing out things you no longer care for, but give away something that has meaning to you. Do that once a year. I thought that was very insightful. Ask me if I've started practicing that yet. No, don't ask me. Where does your heart lie is the question. Does your heart lie with God or with material possessions? And maybe you say, well, how can I even decide that? How can I evaluate my devotion? I hate to be overly simplistic, but take a look at your checkbook. Where does your money go? What gets your most of your investments? Are you laying up treasures in heaven through a generous heart and hand? Or are you being stingy and holding it all for yourself like Scrooge? Well, let me try to wrap this up with some practical stuff. And I have 5 things here. I had them on a nice slide. I have no idea where it went. It looks good, doesn't it? But before I give you these 5 things, here's something else I wanted to throw out. When I put together this sermon, and obviously we're outside of the book of Genesis. We'll go back to Genesis next Sunday. One of the things I've wrestled with is, I've been preaching for over 40 years, and I don't know how many times I've heard, all the church wants is my money. Have you ever heard that? Now, don't raise your hand. Have you ever said that? I did. Don't raise your hand. Have you ever thought that? You know, are you one of those? I would simply challenge you to think about, when was the last time you heard me talk about giving? You won't remember, because it's been a long time. It's not something that we hammer, but it is something that's very biblical. Jesus puts it right here in the heart of the Sermon on the Mount, because he wants our hearts set on heaven. He wants our hearts fully devoted to God, not to the things of this earth. So let me walk you through a quick 5 things. First of all, everything is God's to begin with. Psalm 24, verse 1, "The earth is the Lord's and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it." Whether you know Him or not, whether you follow Him or not, whether you acknowledge Him or not, you are His. Whether you know Him or not, whether you acknowledge Him or not, whether you follow Him or not, your house is His, your car is His, your kids are His, your spouse is His, the food in your cupboards is His, the money in your bank account is His, the clothes on your back is His. Everything is God's to begin with. Understanding that, and I hope that we do, the second thing is this: we, therefore, are managers. He's entrusted to us that we might manage His resources well for His purposes, which is touching the hearts and the souls of men and women with the gospel so that heaven can be a little bit more crowded because we were good managers of the things He entrusted to us. And so the things that I'm very particular about in my possession really aren't mine, they're God's, and they can be used for His glory. And so something as simple as a $20 disc golf disc can be used as a gift to a teenage kid that I bump into down at the course in Marquette Heights and spend an hour with him teaching him how to throw at a basket and maybe building a relationship to tell him about Jesus. And when we're done, I say, just keep it. That was $20. Or it might be that when a missionary comes home for a stay and needs a place to call home for a little while, you say, you can use my spare room as long as you need it. You have access to the kitchen, access to the cupboard. You are my guest in my home because my home is God's home. And we welcome them in. It could be any number of things. Generosity. We are simply managers of what belongs to God. And so when God says, I want you to use your house, your car, your money, your clothes, your food, your whatever, for my purposes, we simply say, okay, that's what I'll do. The third thing that I would share with you is this, and it's just the practical level. Giving, and specifically in this context, giving to the church, putting money in that little golden tray out there in the entryway via our offerings covers the basics like light bills. Did you know Ameren wants us to pay for turning these puppies on Sunday morning? Can you imagine that? You know, it's fall, which is my favorite time of the year. It's beautiful. I don't like raking leaves, but I love the beauty of fall. I love the temperatures of fall. But the thing I don't like about it is this. You know what's on the next page? Winter. Nice and snow and cold. And we'll turn the furnace on so that when you're in here, you're not shivering and shaking and freezing. We have to pay for that? And in the summer when it's, 100 degrees and 120% humidity and we turn the air on, you guys know that. But we pay the light bill, heat in the winter, AC in the summer. Something I'm very appreciative of, my salary. I'll just be honest. Let's be honest about it. Part of your offering pays my salary, and Kara's salary, and Ashley's salary, which is pretty cool. Thank you. Appreciate that. I found out a couple weeks ago that if I had to be a carpenter for a living, I would quickly starve. as well as having my thumb in a cast. Oh, Ryan already beat me to that one. It'll go back out there. I'm not done yet. But it also funds our ministries. What's going on just down the hallway with Kid City? Funds ministry to our little ones. And VBS in the summer. And C4, our ministry to our teens. And various things. You know, if I came over here and I broke Jennifer's microphone, besides her coming up and breaking me, we'd then have to replace it. Those things do happen. I have a new microphone myself because I got hearing aids. And with my hearing aids on my ears, I can't put the stupid little Madonna mic on. You don't call it that? It won't fit. So I have one that clips on my shirt. You ever think about those things? You know, how about something a little more spiritual? Communion? You know, the Welch's Ferry doesn't just arrive in our kitchen and leave a bottle of grape juice. And the communion bread. So that we can come to this table for a holy meal. We buy bread and juice. You get the point, right? I got to stop. But our food pantry, our snack pack. And how about this? Our missionaries. We talked about Casas per Cristo, but we support 10 different missions. Some right here, like Snack Pack and the Food Pantry, but some around the world, like Joel Stewart and David Dale and the DeLongs and others. 10 of them that, because you're faithful, they can be doing the work of God around the globe. Isn't that cool? You make that possible simply because you put your offering in a little golden tray out there on the table. But I got two more things, and this is what I want you to grasp, folks. Because what I have heard year after year after year after year of ministry stops at the practical aspect of meeting a budget. The money's about the bottom line. Are we in the red or are we in the black? Is the budget met? Are the bills paid? Business. We're not a business. We're a body. We're not an organization. We are the Church of Jesus Christ. And so the fourth thing, but really the first thing that I really want you to take home is this. Giving is about more than the basics of a budget. It is an act of discipleship. It exhibits our faith in God, our trust in God, our confidence in God. It's interesting to me that immediately following what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24, that he addresses anxiety and worry over what we'll eat and what we'll wear. That's not a happenstance. It's not that Jesus said, okay, done with the money, let me go on to this attitude thing. It's that you don't need to worry. You don't need to be anxious. You don't need to sweat bullets over it, because God, who feeds the birds of the air and clothes the lilies of the field, cares more about you than he does the birds and the grass. Do we understand that? Giving is an act of discipleship. For a church with our budget, and for you as an individual with your household budget. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. We sang that when I was a kid. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Amen. Some of you remember. Sorry to make your ears bleed. I don't sing well. Don't see well either. And finally, Fifth, but the second thing I really, really want you to take home with you is this. Giving, most importantly, is an act of worship. It's an act of worship. All I have and all I am is yours, Lord. All I have and all I am is yours, Lord. You have entrusted it to me, and I return it all to you. I do know that I shared this illustration with you years ago. I've been here 4.5 years, in case you've lost track. I know that for some of you it seems like an eternity. But thanks for the chuckle. I know I shared this illustration with you once before because it's a very powerful story to me. In his little book, Disciple, written by an Argentinian pastor by the name of Juan Carlos Ortiz, he tells the story of a man who was reading his Bible, and he came across that text which says that there was a merchant of fine pearls, and he came across a pearl of great price. And so he went and he sold all that he had so that he could buy the one. And Jesus says that's the gospel, that's the kingdom, this pearl of great price. And so the man finds this pearl and he comes to Jesus who owns the pearl and he says, I want the pearl. How much is it? And Jesus says, well, what have you got? The man opens up his wallet and he counts out, I got 5, 10, 15, I got $21. Jesus says, great. And the man thinks he is getting a bargain. He hands over the $21, he reaches for the pearl, and Jesus goes, wait a minute, is that all you got? And the man says, well, I got a small checking account, it's got maybe $200, $300 in it. I got a savings account with about $1,000. And Jesus says, that's great, sign it over. And the man swallows a little bit and says, okay, gives it all over to Jesus' care. He says, can I have the pearl? And Jesus says, well, wait, do you have anything else? The man says, well, I got a car. Jesus says, great, give me the title. And the man says, I have one more payment and it'll be free and clear. Jesus says, give me the title. The man goes, looks at the pearl, and he says, it's worth it. He signs the title over to Jesus. Jesus says, you got anything else? He goes, well, you got all my money and you've got my transportation. I guess I just have to go home. You have a home? Yeah, I've got a nice split level, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. We've raised our family there. Jesus says, well, sign over the property deed. The man's starting to sweat bullets at this point, and he signs it over, though, because he wants the pearl. He knows it's of the greatest price. There's nothing with which it could compare. The man's standing there, and Jesus says, man, you got anything else? He said, you got my money, you got my car, you got my house. You know I'm going to have to sleep in my RV. You know where that's going, don't you? Jesus says, sign it over. The man signs it over. And the story goes on. The man turns over his spouse. He turns over his kids. He turns over the clothes on his back. He's standing there with absolutely nothing left that he can lay claim to as being his. And he says, Jesus, can I have the pearl? And Jesus says, here it is. And with it, I entrust back into your care all that you have given me in payment for it. Just remember whose it is. Whose is it? Whose is it? Well, I'll be nice to you. I'll preach on giving again another 5 years. Mark the date. Be on vacation that Sunday. Giving is an act of discipleship. Giving is an act of worship. The eye is healthy when we're generous. The eye is covered with a cataract, which will not let in light when we're stingy. And we get to choose whom we will serve. God of heaven or the temporary possessions of this world. Who do you choose? Would you stand as we sing? Hope to see you next Sunday. We return to the book of Genesis next week.
We are happy that you have joined us today, both in person and online. And again, if you're a visitor, make sure you make your way to the Welcome Center out and to the right. Would you please sing with us?